You're all set.
Okay, we're live.
Yep.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the March 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Village of Amerenik Planning Board. Welcome. Before we get started, I need to take attendance for the minute takers. We have all members of the planning board here. Seamus O'Rourke, Richard Littman, Cindy Goldstein, Ellen Styler, and myself. We have our land use secretary, Brittany O'Neill. We have our land use attorney, Teresa, say Backner, right? Backner. I do this every time. Ashley Lai, our consulting planner. John Kellett, our consulting engineer. Susan Oakley, our consulting landscape architect. Did I miss anybody? Frank Tavolacci, our building inspector. That's everybody, right? Okay. I also have to make an announcement before we get into the agenda. Last planning board meeting, we announced that we had gotten a communication that the applicant was no longer pursuing the application for the multifamily dwelling at 715 Amerenik Avenue. And when their engineer on the project acted surprised, we thought that was a little odd. It turns out that we were misinformed and that the application is moving forward, and the applicant has sent a letter to that effect, so the file reflects it. And on behalf of the applicant, their attorney, Mr. Paul Noto, apologized for any confusion. So I hope that clarifies the situation. Okay. First up on our agenda today is minutes from our last meeting of March 9th, where this announcement was made. part of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments, corrections, omissions, changes, anything with regards to the minutes? Did anybody read the minutes?
I guess my only question was, should we put some kind of notation talking about the 715 Amerenik Avenue and maybe just say see minutes of, March 23rd, or I know it didn't happen at the meeting, but if someone read this.
We could put it in parens and say, this was subsequently clarified to have, do something. Yeah, we could draft something like that. Well, I mean, what happened was there were two firms moving forward on this, and one withdrew, and that was the one that told us they weren't no longer pursuing it, but the other one still is. So how that happened, it was just a poorly worded email from the partner that left the project. Cindy, you want to wordsmith that? Note. Yeah, just
note.
Okay. The information given to the planning board was inaccurate. Corrected. 3/23 planning board meeting. The application is moving forward.
Perfect.
Application is still alive. The application is still
active.
Active. Thank you. I needed the word. Okay.
Or is no longer dead.
Has been
Which is
resurrected.
the definition of alive.
These should come. Okay. Can I have a motion then to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Ellen?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Seamus?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. Okay. Next up on the agenda is an application for a new home, swimming pool, cabana, 1010 Oriental Avenue. Now, this is still, we're having a site plan discussion. I want to note that the application is still not been declared complete by the planning board. So again, this is just open for discussion with planning board members. There will be a time in the future where we'll have a public hearing, but and since it's not complete, there's no point in people commenting on the application the way it looks now because it's likely to change. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
All right, so we have new materials submitted to us by the applicant. So do you want to, Brittany, can you elevate or what's it called? Promote. Can you promote the people who are going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant? We have a new,
Leo, is Diane going to speak as well? I see her.
I believe Diane and Meredith and Christina should all be here.
If they could just, everyone just raise your hand, whoever wants to be promoted.
and again, it's just representatives of the applicant.
I can start while Brittany's moving everyone into the meeting. Good evening, everyone. For the record, Leo Napier with the law firm of Harfness, Carlton, Pearlstein on behalf of the applicants, the Ekstroms. Joining us is Diane Eaton of Keller Eaton Architects, Meredith Juliana of Langen, the landscape architect, and Christina Zolezi of Langen, the civil engineer. We did, since this application was last before you, we did provide a detailed submission responding to the last round of the village consultant's comments. I know, Madam Chair, you noted in the introduction that this isn't yet at a public hearing. And I do believe that the application is fairly complete based on the last round of comments issued by the village consultants. Those plans were revised, specifically the landscape plan and the civil plan were revised in response to Ms. Oakley's comments, as well as John Keller's comments and Ashley's comments. I think the only outstanding comment back was from Susan Oakley, still on the landscape plan, so I'll touch on that in a second. I know there was some confusion the last time this was before you as to who the owner was and who was responsible for the tree removal that occurred on site. It was, details were provided in our submission, but the current owner are the Ekstroms. They purchased the property from DeKalb Development Corp., who had cleared the site in June of 2020, and then subsequently removed the existing house there. We didn't represent the Ekstroms in that purchase. However, there were representations made by DeKalb at the time the sale happened that all proper permits and approvals were obtained for the activities that occurred on site. And the Ekstroms didn't close until September of 2020. So when they filed this application and found out that there was some issues with the property, that was news to them. That said, we are where we are. We've reviewed the last set of comments from Ms. Oakley, and while we may not agree with all of the assumptions and conclusions contained therein, we did have a chance, Meredith had a chance to speak to Susan yesterday, I believe, about some further potential revisions to the landscape plan, which we think we can either achieve or come close to achieving the requested tree replacement count. And that would be with replacing some of the proposed arborvitae with some different tree species. Overall, the plan, the scheme of the plan wouldn't change much. So at the conclusion of this, unless there's any other pending issues with the planning board, I would ask the board to consider scheduling a public hearing so we can get the benefit of any other comments or questions the public may have and be prepared to address those as well. I think unless I can share plans or we can
Before you
discuss.
continue, I just want to clarify. I think we were under the impression that all of this happened in 2021, not 2020.
Oh, sorry. It was actually, yes, 2021. I apologize.
All right. All right. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about trees being cleared in 2021, the Ekstroms closing on the property in September, the trees were removed in June. Okay.
Yes.
That's basically your point. And that, are you saying that you don't feel the applicant should be held responsible or should be responsible for replacing the trees?
So I don't know that it's fair for the applicant to be held to the tree ordinance that was adopted in October.
Not the tree ordinance. They didn't violate the tree ordinance because the tree ordinance was not in effect then.
Yes, but Ms. Oakley's proposed replanting requirement is based off of the tree ordinance.
Because that's where we are today, and that is what is in effect today.
Understood. And so my point being that I don't even need to dive into whether or not we agree or disagree with their calculations. I think with some minor changes to the proposed plantings, we'll be able to either get to that number or very close to it.
Okay, all right, we'll see. Okay, all right. So would you like to present the new plans and what changed from the last time the applicant was here before us? No.
So I brought up our planting plan. You can see in the background of that, there's also the significant stormwater detention features on site, both in the front yard and the rear yard. The additional plant material that's been proposed is on both sides of the driveways. Well, Meredith, actually, maybe if you could walk through the changes to the plan, that may make more sense.
Yeah, sure. You're doing a pretty good job there, Leo. Yeah, so thanks. I'm Meredith from Langen, like Leo was saying. The changes that we made, we incorporated Susan's comments on creating a native plant palette. So we've changed out all of the species to be native species in this version of the plan. And then we've added additional material along the front and a few additional trees in the back as well. So that does kind of cover everything that we've added. And like Leo was saying, we've discussed this and everything, and we're pretty confident we can reach that number in Susan Oakley's most recent set of comments. And I think that covers it. I think you guys are well versed in understanding the underground detention that was required. So that does kind of place a little bit of a limitation on our planting area, but I think we're able to work around it.
Madam Chair, I actually had one question. I noted in Susan's memo that there was a comment about replacing street trees, but I don't believe street trees were actually taken down at all. So I was just looking for clarification on that item.
Yeah.
Normally, if someone comes to us with a project such as this, we look at the street trees regardless of any other issue with regards to trees. And I think and Susan can explain this, what she noticed was that in the past, there had been more street trees. We're not saying those trees were taken down. They may have died or whatnot in the interim, as she reviewed Earth and Google Maps, Google photographs that were online and what information we could find. And so she was just suggesting that while we're at it, to add street trees that didn't appear to be there anymore that had been there in the past.
Understood. So we can take a look at that as well.
Yeah, I mean, because we ask people to plant street trees all the time. That's just something we do, add trees to the inventory for the village.
I'm used to seeing that on the commercial projects. I haven't had too many residentials with your board, so
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay. Now, were there any other changes made to the plans? I think that you probably made some changes to the stormwater management system from the last time you were here.
If Christina's on and could address any changes to the civil plans, and Christina, if you tell me what sheet you want me to flip to, I can.
You can leave it on this sheet. That's fine.
Okay.
So Christina Zalezi with Langen Engineering. We addressed the concern with the footing drains potentially draining to the system in the front there, where it would be feeding groundwater back and forth. We ended up lowering the system a foot. I believe one of the comments from the town engineer was to verify that we have 3 feet of separation to groundwater and rock. We did not encounter groundwater while doing the testing, nor did we encounter rock. So we meet that requirement of providing the 3-foot separation. We showed an overflow from the pool equipment to the rear system for the winterization. And I believe that was generally the revisions that we made. I mean, then there was no more additional units added to the system. I think we also added a catch basin up in the parking lot because we tweaked the grading a little bit in the driveway there to connect back in, but there was no additional units or anything added to the system itself.
Is there any other changes or anything else you would like to highlight for the board and for the people watching?
I could just point out, and hopefully this will work, but the site has been, the stormwater detention and the planting plan have been overhauled from where this started. So just if I could for 1 second. I have to move the Zoom bar. But this is the plan that we started with. Is my screen still showing? Can you all see that plan?
Yes.
So that's the plan that we started with, and then this is where we are currently. So you can see there's a lot more Coltex and a lot more plant material on site. So we are trying to be responsive to the board's comments and then the consultant's comments and come up with a comprehensive and well thought out plan for the property.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Okay, so there's nothing else that you'd like to highlight or anything like that?
No, I think that's it. And as I mentioned, we'd ask the board to consider scheduling the hearing. The proposed changes to the planting plan, the overall scheme wouldn't be drastically different. It would just be a greater variety of material instead of the arborvitae.
There was a range in the landscaping consultant from, I'm just looking for my notes, 78 to 90 trees. What's the, when you say you'll get close to the target, what's the amount of trees that you guys are having?
I don't have her memo open in front of me, Mr. O'Rourke, but I want to say it was 72-ish, thereabouts.
73.
So that's what we're working towards.
78.
I would suggest that I'm trying to count the trees on this plan and I'm not getting anything anywhere near 78 trees.
This isn't the final plan.
So Ms. Goldstein, there's 32 trees currently shown on here, not counting the arborvitae at all. And so what we're talking about is removing sections of the arborvitae and replacing those with a different plant species that wouldn't be an arborvitae, that would be considered a quote unquote tree.
And you have room for that.
And you,
Yes, so they'd be going in place of the arborvitae. So
yeah, but you also have to have the pool screened from the neighbors. So
understood.
the arborvitae for screening, then you have to make sure you have a screen.
Understood.
Right. Okay.
And just
Well,
to,
we'll see. I mean, we're looking forward to the next iteration of the landscape plan, obviously. Yeah.
and maybe just to clarify, it's a lot of trees, but a couple different numbers. Susan, I thought I saw 78 on the low end. And Susan, did you confirm 78 on the low end?
Yes, 78.
And then Leo, you said you guys are working towards a low 70s number at the moment. Is that
Whatever the final conclusion was in Susan's email is what we're trying to accomplish.
got it?
Okay.
We're doing our best. I don't know that we'll be able to get all the way there, but we're trying to.
All right. Well, we'll see where you end up. And obviously, there are other alternatives to making that number. Let's figure it out. Okay. You want to take your screen share down, and we'll hear from our consultants with regards to how we're doing with what we have now. Ashley from AKRF, Ashley Live,
Yes.
KRF, any comments?
So we provided a memo. They did address all of our comments from our last round. I do just want to have clarification on the question about the lighting plan. The application said that no above ground lighting is proposed in the vicinity of the pool, but I am curious if there's going to be any lighting on the back of the house at all that should be picked up in the lighting plan.
Any lighting that we would propose would be a low level LED light fixture. It'd be fully shielded and directional. So that hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, but as of now, no.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any floodlights on the house that would be directed in the direction of the pool?
Nope.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. John Kellett, our consulting engineer.
Hi, good evening. The applicant has made the submission and addressed all our comments. Just for clarity for the board, the stormwater systems that are proposed on site now, they are significantly larger than the systems that were originally proposed. The original proposed system were only the original proposed system were only detaining the increase in runoff from the impervious surfaces. The new systems, the larger systems, will retain the complete volume of runoff from the impervious surfaces so that there's a zero discharge from the systems during a 100-year storm. So it's a significant improvement over what was originally proposed. And just to clarify for Christina, my comment about the depth to the 3-foot depth below the system. You know, I made the suggestion that you lower the front system to lower the point of infiltration below the basement, just to make sure that the water leaching from the drainage system doesn't end up back in the basement. So you just have to pump it and recycle it, which was good. You revised it and made it deeper. But what I noticed is the test hole locations, the data for the test holes do not extend 3 feet past the elevation of the treatment systems proposed. So I didn't see that you confirmed that we have the 3 foot of separation based on the elevations. So if you could just look at that and show us that you do have that separation.
Okay, we may have to do additional testing then, just to verify that we're not gonna encounter rock or groundwater.
You may
Within
have
3
to.
feet.
Yeah, and I noticed it also occurs in the rear system,
Okay,
which is, it's obviously deeper than I guess we originally had it. So that was my lone comment. I noticed that you do have 1,250 yards of excess cut on the property. And your response was that you could potentially use it on site. I would just ask if you intend to use it on site to change the grading plan to reflect where that fill would be placed.
so we
At this
did,
point, I'm assuming it's going to be taken off site.
so what we did was we raised the site 6 inches across to minimize the amount of fill once you factor in the area, the system, the spoils and whatnot. I think we came up with about 4 inches of extra material that we would just put over the site itself. So I don't know if it would necessarily reflect easily on the grades, but the intent is that whatever the excess material is, it's going to be spread across the site. So that way our client doesn't have to export any material at all.
Okay. It only turns out to be 4 inches.
Yes.
Okay.
Could somebody please help me understand that a little bit more? Because I was looking at that CG 101 drawing, and it looked like the net fill was 1,400. So I wasn't sure how there was net fill of 1,400 and then excess.
So the way we did our calculations are we compared the existing grade to the final grade, and then that's where the net fill came from. We came back and adjusted the earthwork numbers to account for the 2 large systems, the gravel. So that's where, by taking that material out and then the foundation for the house, that is how we ended up in a net cut situation, because all that soil is going to be displaced.
Got you. So I don't think that this property is a floodplain. Is that right?
That is correct. It's not in the floodplain.
But then from a layman's understanding, and apologies, when you combine all of these items, you have basically a net cut. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Any other questions on the engineering side of this?
I have a couple also from ignorance, but I just want to make sure I understand this. John, on page 2 of your memo, the last paragraph on that page, referring to portions of the project site along the perimeter, which will continue to flow off-site. And then it talks about the significant reduction. So is that the part of the comment that was addressed by the applicant? I mean, we're not supposed to be discharging off the property, are we?
No, my point there was the only discharge off the property would be what would flow off from the grass surfaces. Any impervious surface, the roof, the driveway, the patios are all collected in the infiltration system.
Okay, but I thought we were supposed to control all of our stormwater on site.
You can control, they are allowed to discharge stormwater from the site to equivalent levels of what discharges from the site presently.
To adjacent sites, to neighbors.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what's occurring presently. And they've significantly reduced the volume of runoff that will be flowing off the site, because they're retaining all the runoff from the driveway, the rooftops, and the patios on site with no discharge.
Okay.
So it's a net reduction. If I'm speaking correctly, Christina. Correct
Yes,
me if I'm wrong.
yes, yeah, we're significantly reducing the amount of stormwater leaving our site from existing conditions because of the detention systems that we have in place. So all that's leaving the site is what's going to sheet off the grass and go, and that's what it's doing today.
Is the grading going to change what that aspect of it at all?
No, the grading doesn't change any of that. We generally try to maintain the existing grades as much as possible. We just raise the grades in some areas across the site due to the earthwork analysis, but we still maintain positive drainage.
Okay. So the question about the trench drain and should have a sump pump, any requirement that the sump pump have a generator?
The trench drain that we're proposing is, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but we're proposing a trench drain with an 18-inch sump to collect the debris. That was the previous comment. And we addressed that. We updated our detail to reflect that a sump would be provided.
Yes. And
But
that
there would be
trench-
no sump pump or anything like that associated with it.
The trench drain flows by gravity to the
Gravity,
infiltration
okay.
system. Yes.
Okay. And I mean, this probably isn't something that the applicant can address, but there was a house there before. So I'm assuming DeKalb brought in fill, because when they took down the house, they would have had a big hole in the ground. So they must have brought material on site to grade it.
I don't know, based upon the previous survey, yes, there was a house there, and based upon the latest survey, I don't know if they brought fill in, but where the house was sitting, there is a substantial depression that's there. So we would be filling that in by placing the pool and the system back in, the drainage and everything back in there. So we're filling that in so that way there's not going to be standing water on the property. I don't know if they brought in fill or not.
So the 1,200 feet, square yards of additional cut is over and above what you're going to need to fill in that depression. And
No. We're only raising the grades, I believe, maybe a foot in that area, but we're everything they're not going to bring in any material other than the gravel for the pipe trenching, the system, but any soil is all going to be generated on site from the installation of the foundation for the basement and then the two systems. So we're not anticipating them importing any soil.
right, you're going to have extra soil.
Yes, and then we're going to spread that extra, so it results in approximately 4 inches of extra material that they'll spread over the site. So they're not going to take anything off site.
And that won't exacerbate the off-site water flow to neighbors.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and we keep getting it the same way. Sorry, Cindy, but if you don't mind, just when you raise something. So if there's standing water on site now, why won't it run off with the new plans? Is it because of retention systems?
Correct. I mean, I don't anticipate there being any standing water on site. It's just that there's a depression where the house was previously located in the rear of the property. The way the grades are, it would settle in there. I believe it's probably 6 inches to a foot lower than the surrounding grades. So water could stand in there, but it would more than likely infiltrate. What we're trying to do is keep that from happening. And that's why we're filling that area and we're raising it up so that way there's positive drainage. And a lot of it is going to go towards our system in the backyard because of the catch basins that we have installed.
Gotcha. Because I know we've received some letters. I know the area has some flooding, so there's going to be concerns from neighbors just about all this. So each time it comes
Yes.
up, it's helpful to.
No,
helpful to be specific. Yeah.
understood. That's why I know when I had talked to Mr. Callard previously, he had recommended that we do infiltrate up to the 100-year storm because of the existing flooding concerns that are out there. So that we, in talking with our client, we agreed that that's what we would do. And that's why the system is substantially larger than what was initially submitted.
I have
Yeah,
another-
the applicant did go over and above on the design of the infiltration system. The original system did comply with the regulations, but it had discharge. And we were concerned with the point discharge to the roadway and to the neighbors in the rear.
And there were two surveys that were submitted with this application. One, I think from 2003, and then one more recent. And just looking at the elevations along Oriental Avenue, there's about a foot difference between the two surveys. Can somebody explain how can that be?
It depends upon the datum that the surveyor used for the original survey. A lot of times the datum has probably been since changed, so there can be a foot difference in contour elevations between the two. The intent of submitting the previous survey was to demonstrate the trees that were on the property previously, so that way we could use it as part of our stormwater analysis and talking with Mr. Callard and addressing the concerns about the property being wooded. So we wanted to accurately reflect that information and update our modeling to take into account those areas that were wooded previously instead of using the current conditions.
Great, thank you.
I had one last question for John Kellard, perhaps. Our prior discussion had talked about clay soils and slow percolation. Is that related to the test pits? I just want to revisit that discussion in light of where we're at right now and if whether that's still a concern.
Well, it is slow percolation of the soils. But that's why the systems are so large, because the runoff will infiltrate slower into the ground. They need a larger volume of storage. And it's reflected in their design. They tested for the percolation of the soil, and they've sized the system based on that slower percolation. If we had a fast soil there, the systems would probably be much smaller in size.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the engineering and the changes? Any comments? Okay, that brings us to Susan Oakley and the landscape architect, the landscape memos that we've had. I think that we discussed this a little bit earlier, but Susan, who I think did a really nice job trying to figure out how many trees were probably on the property at some point in time, and did a lot of research and really put a lot of effort into helping the board determine, because we had heard things from neighbors and whatnot, but we needed some proof. And so we started with the 2003 survey. And I don't know, Susan, if you want to just briefly, I don't know if anybody has any questions, or any of the board has any, or the applicant have any questions about how you determined from there what the trees were, and then how what sizes they were and things like that, because we had to figure out how many trees needed to be replaced and what they needed to replace with, because the law, larger trees have to be replaced with more trees than smaller trees, because the canopy needs to eventually be replaced. So
Just in summary, you're correct. It started with the 2003 site survey. And then using Google Maps and Google Earth and some, excuse me, street views and aerial views, determined as time progressed what might have been removed and what needed to be added. And that's how the determination came to the number of trees that were on the site in 2021. Then using the tree law, the Village of Mamaroneck tree law, to determine if all those 61 trees were removed, what the, oh, I'm sorry, I left out a step. That was trying to figure out how these trees might have aged, because we knew that the majority of them were there in 2021, how they may have aged in the 18 years between the survey and the time of takedown. So that the majority of the trees were maples. I used a US forestry research that determined that trees, red maple trees can grow 3 to 3.5 inches in diameter over the course of 10 years. We were dealing with 18 years. And because this was a random calculation, I reduced the growth to 2 inches over 10 years, just to give the applicant the benefit of the doubt. So we came up with a number of replacement trees based on the size that was taken down, and that would have been 93 trees. But in an effort to help the client, the applicant reduce their burden, we only enlarged the size of the 6-inch diameter trees and kept the replacement equation the same for the rest of the trees, bringing the total number to 78 replacement trees. So there were a number of places where we tried to be accommodating in the size of the growth and then in the replacement number.
Does anybody on the board have any questions for Susan?
No,
So
I mean,
that-
I think this was, I'm sorry, Ellen, go ahead.
Oh, no, so I just have a question. So when the trees are replaced, they're not replaced with the same size though, correct? I mean, you don't replace an 18-inch tree with an 18-inch tree. You plant a small one and.
Yes, the replacement tree needs to be 2 to 2.5 inch caliper,
Okay.
which are, you know, relatively good sized trees.
And if you have an 18-inch tree you're replacing, you have to replace it with 2.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. That's how it works.
Yeah, it would take flatbeds and cranes to plant an 18-inch tree. So,
Yeah, I was figuring that wouldn't really be doable.
right.
Susan, how tall is a 2 or 2.5? How tall are the trees that would be?
Caliper, it depends on the species. It depends on the species, but you know, it for a red maple, it could be 20 feet, 15 feet. It depends. It depends on the nursery it's acquired from. It depends on how well it was taken care of, whether it was pruned. There are a number of
Okay, I was just,
area.
you know, because it would look silly to have, you know, 73 trees all exactly that they would look like clones, you know, all the same height, all the same diameter. You know, you want some variation in there, and I'm so glad that we're talking about trees, not shrubs or bushes or arborvitae. I mean,
Yes.
it seems from your forensic, you know, landscape architect report here that the sorry. That you're talking specifically about trees and not anything else, which the applicant may or may not want to put on the property. Of course, they can put in arborvitae, but that's not going to count towards the tree count.
We're following the definition of tree that's in the law, that's in the code.
Right, which seems appropriate because that's what came down.
That's what it is, right. Right.
And so, I mean, I would think it's going to be a challenge to get near the 73 number with the configuration of the property according to the plans right now. But I don't know how much space the roots need, how much distance between the trees so that they can actually grow. I don't know how much, there was a house there before, so clearly there's space on the property for a house. So I guess
Right.
we'll have to see.
And based on your first comment, the plants that they came up with in the interim, in the second iteration of the landscape plan, there was a very varied variety of plants. So I trust that that we just have to see what they come up with, and I'm sure that it will be a nice selection of plants in the right places.
Great, thank you.
So it sounds like from what we've heard from everyone, this is the only open issue at this point in time. That seems to be correct. The SWIP looks good, the stormwater management looks good, the swimming pool code, everything's been met. So I think that I echo Ms. Goldstein's comment about, I don't know where we're going to fit all these trees on here. And we're looking forward to seeing how you do that, because they do have to be planted appropriately so that they survive. They can't be too close together. You have to have, the proper hole for the roots, for, the size of the canopy, and to allow everything to grow properly and to replace the canopy over the next, well, I won't be alive to see it, but I feel very reluctant about scheduling a public hearing now. I'd rather wait and see what the landscape plan comes back to us as. But I yield to our consultants who are experts in this and to give us better, to give us advice.
So if I could just respond to that, Madam Chair, the general idea, and this is probably going to be oversimplifying things, and Meredith will be the one that comes up with it, but as far as the additional trees, we'd be taking out, I'm going to just make this simple, but the row of arborvitae along the back property line and replacing that with something more significant that was not an arborvitae. But so I know you all are saying it's tight and this and that, but there would be, we're taking plant material that we're currently proposing out and replacing that with a different plant. And the idea is that we will get that to the point where there's enough trees in those areas to satisfy the count. So overall, the grand scheme of the plan, while it will be slightly different, it won't be drastically different.
And is that with the, at least theoretical plan to let all those trees grow to kind of their full maturity, they'll have that kind of spacing? Is that how, are you planning to get them in to meet the number, or are you planning to get them in based on, like what the appropriate sizing for a full grown, version of those varieties are?
No, certainly the client doesn't have any interest in planting trees that are just going to die and need to be replanted. So there are ways to, instead of having a solid row of arborvitae, there could be a zigzagged double row that's offset kind of diagonally of different plant materials, so they're not crowding each other out. Meredith, if you want to chime in, feel free.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, actually. So that there's no intention to be planting this just to meet a number. The intention is to come up with a plan that meets all of your concerns and will be there for the lifetime of the property. So.
Okay. Ashley or Teresa, do you want to weigh in on the public hearing?
I can start. If you were to schedule a public hearing tonight, it would be for 1 month out.
Right.
And I think it would be very important that the landscaping plan be made available to the board and its consultants in advance of that public hearing, and with sufficient time for the consultants to generate a memo, in particular, Susan Oakley, to generate a memo on that. So typically our deadline for submissions is 2 to 3 weeks in advance of a meeting. So I think that would only give you about 1 week to turn around a revised landscaping plan.
Kind of tight.
We've reviewed this with our client. So we've reviewed this with the homeowners and everything already. So I think we have a pretty good plan that we've talked through. So it's a matter of updating the drawings and getting them over to you. So I think it's doable.
Okay. All right. long as you understand, because if if you don't make certain, dates, then the public hearing, although you'd have to go about noticing it and getting it in the newspaper and all those things, we'd have to cancel it if we don't have the materials in order to allow the public to comment on a full application and the board as well. So
Understood.
as long as you all understand how the process works, and I can see Meredith. Wait a minute, going anywhere?
Looking at a calendar.
Working evenings anyway. Okay, so then we need to schedule a public hearing for the second meeting in April. Is that it's March? Yeah, it's March now. It's almost April 1st. The second meeting in April, which Brittany is the 20. Where's my calendar? Let's see. We need to
Believe it's the 27th.
20th.
27th. It's the
The
first one is the
27th.
13th and then the 27th.
Right, the 27th. Is everyone comfortable with that? I'm knowing that if we don't get this, the public hearing will be canceled.
Give it a try.
All right, so we have to do this.
Just one question, sorry. Brittany, what's the drop dead date that we would need to see the plan in order for the public notice to get in the newspaper?
I believe, if I'm correct, Ashley, I think it's 15 days for those, right? The notices, or is it 10?
Wait, can you say that again? Sorry.
We're talking about the notice requirement, when the notices would have to go out by.
I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to look it
Yeah,
up.
I have to double check my timeline too. I don't have it up. I can't access it here. I'd have to double check. I believe it might be 15 days, but it depends on the type of application it is.
Yeah, our notice requirements are all
Yeah, they're different per
type of application.
application type. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay.
whatever the deadline is, I think we should be able to make it, provided it's not tomorrow.
Yeah, even if it's 15
Um,
days, I mean, that seems like the max that I've seen. That would still give you time.
So the notice has to go in the newspaper 15 days before the meeting.
Well, yeah, but you have to give it to the newspaper sooner than the 15
Right,
days.
it's right. We have this all like in a schedule that you would have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Brittany,
so
Brittany, I can connect with you tomorrow just to make
Yeah,
sure that we
I
have our
can
time.
go over everything tomorrow with you.
When she's in the office and she's looking at her computer, yeah. Mhm.
But it would be really good if you could get it to them, next week to
Sooner rather than
review.
later.
That would be really helpful if you could.
No problem.
It's
Meredith
10
and
days.
Susan-
And
Meredith and Susan have been communicating, so we'll continue to operate that way.
Okay.
That's for newspaper and neighbor notices, Ashley?
That is the sign posting, the written notice to the neighbors, and the public hearing notice
Okay, so it's 10 days, Ashley said.
per 342-77E.
Okay, all right, so I need a motion then to schedule a public hearing for the, what did we just say, 27th of April?
Yep.
So moved.
Need a second.
Second,
Okay, we'll call the vote. Richard,
Yes.
Seamus,
Yes.
Ellen,
yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Okay, you're on the calendar.
Thank you all. Have a nice night.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
thank you. Okay, we need the 1010 Oriental folks to be demoted after they were promoted. Okay, the next item on the agenda then is a discussion of a proposed local law to change the, everybody, I gotta put all my 1010 Oriental papers before we start this. I got it. I think I have it, yeah. To change the wetlands permitting process. And I think we have now, we have to take good notes here because we have to write this up in a memo to the Board of Trustees when we're done. So I'm going to try to take some notes, but I'm going to need backup on this. Okay, so we got both a marked up copy and a clean copy of the proposed Wetlands Law Amendment back in beginning of March. I hope everyone's had a chance to review it. The most noticeable change in this is that this particular draft removes all of the wetlands permitting process from the planning board and moves it over to the Harbor and Coastal Zone Management Commission, HCZM. And so I have that. I have a question about that. And then Cindy, who has more information on this and has some history, might want to speak to that. But I don't know how you want to go through this. There's typos in here, not a lot, but there's typos in here.
Well, could we maybe start with the important question, which I think you just posed, is, what is the point of this?
Right, and then we'll work our way down.
Yeah, because I have typos, I have questions that are minor, but if the premise of this is, I think that's more important to do the meat, so.
Right. So why don't you school us in the history of this? Email, and I think somebody on the history of this. Right.
Yeah, I somewhere in my mind, I remembered we talked about this when I was chair of HCZMC, and I found a memo from 2017 when we, just as background, we had a different building inspector, we had different council, we had different planners, we had a different board of trustees, and we had a different planning board, although Richard might have been on it back then.
Yes.
Okay, so as part of ongoing review of,
And is anybody still on HCZM that was there then?
no.
That's why this didn't get carried over, right? Okay.
Well, yeah, I can't expect people to have this institutional knowledge is nice, but I'm a dinosaur. So back in 2017, HCZMC did a memo to the Board of Trustees suggesting several things that needed to be addressed. I think we've actually done one, which is the tree law. But part of it was amending Chapter 192, talking about granting wetland permitting authority for marine structures only to HCZMC. And at the time, the planning board and HCZMC agreed that that made sense. I don't think we've done any marine structures lately here at planning board, but there's really nothing for planning board to do with marine structures because it's basically a consistency question. So that always seemed kind of silly. So that's the genesis of this conversation, was to help applicants, to streamline the process, to make it easier, but it was very narrow. It was, in fact, the language in the memo from our land use council at the time talked about the planning board has advised the Board of Trustees that it supported the transfer of jurisdiction to HCZMC where the wetlands permit application is coupled with a marine structures or perimeter permit application. By contrast, the planning board expressed a desire to retain jurisdiction over wetland permit applications that are a part of a subdivision or site plan application. And this is a policy matter for the Board of Trustees to resolve. So I think maybe some of the reticence on some members of the planning boards to give this up if it's part of a site plan or other, larger subdivision application makes perfect sense. That belongs in the planning board. So why would you're actually going to make things worse, I think, by taking everything away from planning and giving it to HCZMC where they might not have jurisdiction.
It's not practical to have two boards looking at the same application and making changes to it. And you'll ping pong back and forth between the boards, because if somebody makes a change on the wetland side, that's going to change the site plan. And then if you do them sequentially and then give the wetlands permit, then they come for a site plan and you change the application, then they have to go back through wetlands. It just really impractical.
Well, and I think there could be, and I haven't looked at the statute, there could be a situation where HCZMC would not see an application for whatever reason, but now we're saying they have to see it for the wetlands permit, where it would otherwise be handled all at planning board. So I think we're creating a problem where there isn't one.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. It makes sense to me. I couldn't see how on a practical matter, a sense it would just totally work. It just wouldn't work. So
Yeah, I remember the discussion, Kathy, and I would send the same memo to the Board of Trustees simply because you don't do planning in a vacuum, and you can't do it just as Cindy just said. You can't do it piecemeal. You got to be comprehensive, and I know the rationale. I heard whispers. The rationale was to make it easier to apply for said permit, but it's not logical because there's no backup supervision or purview over what's going on and how it makes sense in the whole scheme of the village.
Somebody just wants to put up a dock, right? Is that what, when you say marine structures, Cindy?
Yeah.
You know, a boat lift.
Right, some of the, well, Seamus would know, he's been on HCZMC more recently than me, but yeah, when someone wants to redo their dock or change the dock configuration, they need a marine structures permit, you know, and a wetlands permit. And why doesn't HCZMC do all of that? That makes perfect sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Think about what we did on Phillips Park Road, which was within 50 feet of the river. You know, and that really wasn't a harbor coastal issue. That was a zoning issue.
Right.
That would preclude us.
Because when we did that project, we noticed some inconsistency and there was conflict between the wetlands permit law and the zoning law, 342-50 subsection B subsection 5. So this, if everything moves over to HCZM, it creates more of a problem. And there's inconsistencies in other sections of the law that mention planning board. So none of those inconsistencies were addressed in this draft law. So that's to me another issue. It's going to create some inconsistencies that it doesn't address. But if the board decides to keep certain functions such as subdivisions and site plans with wetlands permits with the planning board, then they still have to address some conflicts. But I didn't go through the entire code to figure out where these inconsistencies might appear. That's something for someone else. But
Well, I'm happy to circulate this memo from 2016 and 2017, because there were other suggestions in it of things that the board could do if they want to tinker with the code that would be helpful rather than slowing things down.
Right.
So maybe this is part of our recommendation, besides, you know, dealing with the typos and definitions that for words that don't appear in the text of the law. Details.
And also there's just some procedures that are outlined in here that just couldn't possibly work. They're just not practical. And so I have a couple of those highlighted.
I mean, this is a big job. I don't, you know, it's.
Yeah, somebody did a lot of work on this. Somebody from AKRF, they did a lot of work on this. And
I don't think we were the primary authors on it. I think we just helped take some notes at some HCZMC meetings.
Because I have to say that, you know, it's better presented and clarified exactly what a watercourse is and like the whole descriptions of wetlands and stuff like that. But the procedures that are outlined on here are, you know, on page 8, they're talking about emergency activity, 192-4B5. If there has to be some emergency activity and they can't get to protection of life, property, or natural resources, and they can't get to get a permit within 48 hours, they have to notify the commission. The commission has no office. The commission meets once a month. How do they notify the commission? That has to be the building inspector, the building department. You know, and we can wrote this up, but you know, anything like that can't go to a volunteer board. They just don't have any capacity to receive any emergency notification unless somebody gets a call at home. But then what are they going to do? So things like
then they're going to call a meeting because they can't do anything. They have to have a meeting.
Exactly, they have to call a meeting. So it's not appropriate for any emergency activity to go to a land use board like that meets once a month.
The more recent background that I have from, last couple of years in HCCM is, I think this came up probably with no overlap of personnel, Cindy, from the time when it first came up. And so we looked at it from a couple of different perspectives. One is, I think that the reduction from 2,500 to 1,000 as sort of the trigger point is a positive. And then I think if you read the what the law is trying to do to protect those resources, I think that's a positive. I think that the drafting was done by HCZM members, some of whom are attorneys, but not really very formally. So I've throughout thought that, between typos and, uncapitalized terms and stuff, there's some informality to it. Maybe that's something you have to live with. And then absolutely, I think there was the debate of who the correct, board, commission, or otherwise to administer it was. The perspective from HCZM when I was on there was probably that if something has a wetland, which is going to have the environmental sensitivity that HCZM deals with between wildlife, pollution, flooding, otherwise, they wanted it to get to HCZM. And so where my kind of expertise runs short is around what I think you guys were just talking about, which is if it goes to both, is that inefficient? But if, a wetland issue comes only to planning and doesn't get that LWRP consistency somehow, then, that's probably lacking. I don't know whether that's what this does or not.
They
I
always
focus,
HCZM for consistency, always.
yeah. So then,
Should stay that way.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that should be pretty clearly defined in chapter 240 in terms of the jurisdiction of HCZMC, and I think it is.
Yeah.
You don't get certain single family homes and subdivisions and things like that, but if they're anywhere near anything of a critical environmental area or wetland, that goes to you guys too, your former guys. But I think it was just the redundancy of the marine structures permit and the perimeter permits for the boatyards. That was the other thing.
Yep.
That's strictly an HCZMC matter.
And this is, take it for the grain of salt that it is. I was one member on that board for a couple of years after when this originated. But I think that the heart of what HCZM cared about was moving the 2,500 to 1,000. And then notice requirements. I think at one point, Greg, when he was the planner, tried to take a stab at making it a little bit more consistent with the way that all of the other notice requirements in the village work. And I'm not sure whether that was successful or not, because I'm not real familiar with those. But that's what I have to add at this point anyway. So.
Well, should we go through it? So we need a memo that says that.
Yeah.
But should we go through it page by page and go with the typos and consistencies or whatever?
I mean, we can. I don't have a problem with that.
Or we don't have to. It's okay.
Well, for things like typos, if you wanted to mark it up, I could combine it all into one memo that way. If you have them already marked up.
My copy's marked up, obviously, but I have things that are more than typos. The whole notice section, the whole application section, it has to make sure it conforms with the other things that are needed for an application. But section 6, where it talks about notice of application, meeting and hearing, it doesn't, to me, appear to make a distinction between a public meeting and a public hearing. And it has the same notification requirements with newspaper for a public meeting, and that should just be for a public hearing. So that whole section there is just not right. The whole thing has to be reworked and have a difference between a public meeting and a public hearing, and what notices are for, for what. And within 5 days of receipt, it has to be, determined, and, it has to be published 21 days before the meeting, which isn't 21 days. So this has been a concern of Ashley and Teresa since they arrived on the scene, that our notice procedures are all wrong and they're all over the map. And this makes it worse. This makes it worse. So we have to, I mean, we can make a comment just saying that this section has to be reworked and that if there's a difference between a meeting and a hearing.
It shouldn't be a wheel reinvention, right? I mean, like I said, I remember Greg saying, let's just make it consistent with like other parts of the code. Like
The problem is that the rest of the code is a mess. So if you're copying from a part of the code that's already a mess, it's just
Right,
replicating the
right.
problem.
Right. So, yeah, the rest of the code's not consistent. And if we're going to do a memo, we should probably mention that in our memo.
Yeah.
But,
We might want it as a
21
whole separate chapter
days
just for that.
to have the applicants, provide the notice and, and all adjacent governmental agencies have to be noticed. We only do when we do a seeker, I believe. We don't do it just for permits. We do it when we have property that is in 2 jurisdictions. We, over by Rye, the Rye border, there are houses and properties on the sound there that are in both the Village of Mamaroneck and the city of Rye. And I'm sure there are places like that on the borders with the town of Mamaroneck as well. But there's no wetlands or there's no water there. So
I think, Kathy, what would be probably most efficient for the board is for everybody to provide, as Ashley said, like any comments regarding typos or inconsistencies to her and I think I have some ideas about how to simplify these notice provisions. They don't have to be 2 pages long.
Right.
And then
this one's longer than 2 pages.
all right, 3 pages long. Okay. Just reading it makes my eyes go cross. So let us work on making the changes, suggested changes, especially to that. Because that could then
we're funneling our comments all to Ashley then.
Yeah, let's do that. But then
Ashley,
you guys can review
I'm fine with it.
Right.
Yeah, so on the next agenda, we would have I would put together a red line with all the board's comments and a memo summarizing what the purpose of the comments were, the intent behind the comments.
All right, or just a memo to the board of trustees. I mean,
right.
Right. Okay. So we'll let them know we're working on it, and it's going to be on the agenda again in April because we have an extra week out there. I don't want this to go on their agenda for them to vote on before, which is what happened with one of the other laws that came our way.
I'd like to make a suggestion about the issue of the lawn care in the proposed law. And it does say that no permit is needed for the lawn maintenance, and chemicals can be used as long as they're not deleterious. But I wanted to suggest perhaps it should be specified, these suggestions for Save the Sound, which is that no fertilizers or pesticides can be placed on lawns within 20 feet of a wetlands boundary, because fertilizers and pesticides can attach to soil particles and wash into wetlands, depleting oxygen and deadly to aquatic life. So I'm wondering if that would be a beneficial enhancement of this law.
The only thing I think you have to be careful of there is that DEC has primary jurisdiction over the use of pesticides. So we would just, Ellen, we would just have to look and make sure we're not running afoul of any state law. Okay.
I see, makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can do that. If nothing else, we can just call DEC and say, would you guys object to this? And,
okay.
Or can we suggest that people follow or say people have to follow the DEC guidelines? Because I think at HCZMC, we did put conditions on resolutions that for certain sensitive properties right at the sound, that they couldn't use, and they were very happy to agree to it. Hopefully they're following the guidelines, but that they would not use certain pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, because they were in such a sensitive place, and they went with that. And if we can incorporate that in the wetlands law, I think that would be terrific.
Yeah,
I think it would be terrific. I think you can ask people to agree to things in conditions that you may not be able to put in the law, okay? Because you're using seeker for like a site-specific evaluation. But I don't know, Cindy, I'm not drawing a conclusion. I'm just saying this is something to be aware of. That's all, that's all.
Makes sense.
Okay. When do we think we can get our comments to Ashley by? So let's put some timeframes on this, baby.
Well, what, can I ask what format would be most helpful, Ashley? I mean, I don't think I have a red line, but it's not something I can red line. I don't have a Word doc, right?
No, we have PDFs.
How do
I think I
work
might have a Word doc.
There is
There is
definitely.
there is a Word version of it.
on the
exists.
website?
No, I'd have to send it, or Ashley might have it. I think it was sent
I
around
just- yeah.
first. Yeah.
If you send us a Word doc, we can comment, we can redline and comment on it and put our
Yep.
comments on it. Yeah.
I'll circulate that.
Okay, good. And then today's Wednesday. When would you like it by? Next week?
Look at my calendar here.
We get an extra week because of the way the calendar falls. We get a week off.
Okay, so the next meeting's on the 6th, right?
13th.
13th.
Oh, the
13th.
13th.
The 13th.
All right, so how about comments by the 4th or the 5th?
That gives us more.
Gives us,
Okay, all right. You'll have mine before then. I want to do this.
Well, have we kind of all agreed? Do we need something more formal in terms of just the overarching thought about how this is laid out in terms of who does what?
You're gonna approve it, Cindy.
Okay,
The
So
next
you're gonna
meeting.
approve it.
the memo to the board.
yeah, so
Right.
I've been taking notes with what everybody's been saying so far, so I'll put that all into the letter from the planning board to the Board of Trustees, and then,
That's actually most critical.
Good.
Yeah, I didn't want this to be a non-majority, or it would be best to be, a unanimous recommendation, so I just wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page.
It sounds like we are.
I just have one other question. How do you replace wetlands in section on page 17 when they say, if you're going to build on a wetlands, you need to replace it? How do you replace a wetland? I don't get that.
Well,
I mean, one thing I don't love about it, but is in there, is it does allow for mitigation, right? This law, so that my guess is that would be how. But does anyone have a better answer than that?
the way it works with both freshwater wetlands and tidal wetlands, and I agree with you, Ellen, it's a lot more difficult to envision how one would do this with tidal wetlands. But with freshwater wetlands, there are certain ratios that people follow for replacement of wetlands only after they've established that there's no way to avoid the impact. So you first have to, make sure you've avoided and minimized to the greatest extent practical. And then and only then will, like a federal or state agency, look at whether a proposal for replacement mitigation, what they call compensatory wetland mitigation, really can make sense. Now, if you have a pretty low quality freshwater wetland and you need to cross it with a road, can you mitigate that? Yes, you can mitigate that. And I've seen that done many times. If you have a valuable tidal wetland, I seriously doubt that you could ever mitigate an impact to that other than through something extraordinary like removing bulkhead somewhere else and allowing an area of tidal wetland to reestablish itself where it had been previously. So your options with that are very limited. And you would also hardly ever get a permit to do that from the state or the feds. They don't like to give impact permits involving direct impacts to tidal wetlands.
And even the Village of Mamaroneck LWRP for consistency has like a tremendously high bar on some of them. It's maximum extent possible in a lot of situations, right? Rather than just
Right.
practical. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's really the big difference between the type of wetlands you have in Mamaroneck and the type of wetlands we have in upstate New York. You know, a lot of times they're created by, they're created by drainage blockages a lot of times. So it's possible to replace and create, and it's much easier. Very difficult with tidal wetlands.
Interesting, thank you.
Yeah. Tonight was education night. A lot of things tonight. Okay. Is everyone done? Anybody have anything they want to add?
I just have a quick question. So the notice requirements currently for Harbor Coastal is only for marine structures and perimeter. So what they're proposing is that it would be anything going to Harbor Coastal would now have, they're trying to mimic what other boards do for
No.
notices, what I just read.
No, they want
No,
everything.
Just for wetlands.
Just right now, all wetlands permits are given out by the planning board. So this has the wetlands permits being given out by HCCM.
Right.
Now, we're saying the marine structures of wetlands permits could go to HCCM, but we should keep the ones that are associated with the things we do, like site plans and subdivisions.
Okay.
Go to HCCM for consistency. So this is the wetlands permit process. And if it works out the way we would like it, some of them would go to HCCM and some of them, fewer of them would come to planning. And the notice requirements would be the same for either board.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
The notice requirements go with the type of permit, not with
Right.
the board. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. All right. I need a motion then to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
It's
you.
okay With you all.
Have a great night. Bye.
Have a good night.